Imagine a place where the beauty is so extreme that it takes your breath away, but where it smells like death, and the air is so frozen that it burns your lungs when you breathe. An archipelago where you can earn more money cutting cod tongues than working as a manager in the capital. A place where the sun disappears for months, plunging you into a darkness that breaks your head, and when it returns, it stays 24 hours a day, preventing you from sleeping for weeks. That place exists, and it's called Lofoten, a region that is often lethal and contradictory, where seeing a tourist camping among graves is normal, but where even dying has its rules. Sit back, hit like, and open your eyes wide, because in this new video from Uncensored World, you're going to discover the reality of the most beautiful islands on Earth, and how the most obscene wealth coexists with such absolute solitude that everyone knows each other intimately. Let's get started. In the heart of one of the wildest seas on the planet, in the middle of the North Atlantic, off the coast of Norway, there is a group of islands that for centuries did not appear on maps as a place where it was possible to live. Not because they were unknown, but because they were not recommended. They were not a destination. They were a warning. Here, nature never wanted humans. These islands are called the Lofoten Islands, Norwegian territory for centuries, and from the beginning they were seen as a challenge, not a home. The first Viking sailors who arrived here were not looking for comfort or shelter. They came for the fish, for the roots, and once they disembarked, for the simple need to survive. In many medieval maps of northern Europe from those centuries, this area appeared surrounded by impossible creatures. Giant sea serpents, open mouths in the middle of the ocean, whirlpools that seemed to have a life of their own. Many books were written about these legends, but they were not embellishments. They were warnings. One of those maps spoke of a place called Havmörket, the sea that decides. It did not point to an exact location, but rather an idea. You are not in charge here. If you entered without respect, the ocean would swallow you. And if you survived, it was not because of your own merit. It was because nature had given you its permission. That mentality remained engraved in the minds of the people who decided to stay and live here. It is a way of understanding the world that still remains today, as the people of Lofoten do not boast about their suffering or dramatize their pain. They simply coexist and survive in one of the most remote and extreme places on Earth. That is the real Viking heritage, not the horned helmets or romantic stories, which, as you will see, are much more common in summer than in winter, but a culture of enduring a life that many would not be able to endure for weeks. This lifestyle begins in childhood and explains why loneliness is normalized here, why the sun or the cold do not always affect mood, and why human relationships work differently. To the point that, in the winter months, the most used app is not Google Maps but Tinder, and in some areas most people not only know each other by sight, but have seen almost everything. Because on these islands there are villages where there are almost no young women left. And this has led to extraordinary, often uncomfortable solutions, which we will discover later in this journey. Because to understand how it got to this point, you first have to understand this. Lofoten is not made to protect you. It is made to test you, and that is still evident every day. In the 21st century, these islands continue to function as if human error were not allowed, as if you did not have a second chance. A reality that is easily understood when you know that, for example, there is no hospital on some of these islands. If something serious happens to you, there is no ambulance that can arrive in minutes. There is only the sea, a wild sea with huge waves, extreme winds that freeze your skin. And wait. Evacuations depend on the weather, and in this place the weather does not understand schedules or human emergencies. If the sea is rough, the boat does not leave. If the wind is too strong, the helicopter does not take off. And when it does not take off, there is no alternative. That is why it is often not possible to give birth here, as deliveries do not take place here. Pregnant women have to leave the island days in advance, Move to the mainland and wait there, because giving birth in these conditions is not an option. Here, life doesn't begin when you want it to. It begins when you can. And something similar happens with death. There are emergencies that can't wait for a doctor, because often there is no doctor. They have to arrive by boat or helicopter, and only if the sea and wind allow it. On some islands, something even more extreme happens. Not only is it difficult to die here, but you can't stay either. There are places where it is not even possible to be buried. In Lofoten, on some islands, dying is not an option. Places that the world sees as postcards, but which operate according to rules that do not appear in the photos. Villages like Rain, considered one of the most beautiful on the planet, surrounded by perfect mountains and calm waters, where everything seems designed to last forever, except human life. Places that, as you can see, seem eternal and magical on Instagram, but where nature continues to rule even after many people's last breath. People who know that if something happens today, everything will depend on whether the ocean is in a good mood. That's why there's no improvising here. People don't live in fear, but neither do they live carefree. Here, life is planned because improvising kills. And this way of living so on the edge changes your mind. It makes you accept things that would be unthinkable elsewhere. It makes you put loneliness into perspective. Understand why some people leave and why others, even knowing all this, decide to stay forever. Now tell me, could you live in a place like this where neither birth nor death is guaranteed? I'll read your comments. Understanding this is key to understanding why, in Lofoten, the human body never fully adapts. Not because it is weak, but because the basic rules that most of us live by do not exist here. During the winter, in what is known as the polar night, the sun disappears for several weeks. It is not a long night, it is something else. The day ceases to exist, and there is no reference point for understanding time. There is no sunrise to wake you up, or sunset to tell you it's time to stop and rest. That is why these extreme changes have such a profound effect on the population, as the human body functions on rhythms. Sleeping, waking up, producing hormones, regulating mood. All of this depends, to a large extent, on light. And when the light goes out, the body enters a territory for which it was not designed. During these months of polar night, many inhabitants describe the same feeling: constant tiredness, apathy, difficulty concentrating. It is not sadness, but rather a kind of slow shutdown. Studies of Arctic populations show a clear increase in emotional disorders, insomnia, and chronic fatigue during the sunless months. Not because people are more fragile, but because the brain loses its main anchor. Here, depression is not talked about much. People talk about being down, about having no energy, about getting through the winter. The language softens what the body is going through, and when the sun finally returns, it does not do so gradually. It returns completely. During the summer, the sun does not set. 24 hours of light. At first, it seems like a gift. Endless days, landscapes shining at all hours, seemingly inexhaustible energy. But just as before, even with this eternal sun, the body fails again, because now it doesn't know when to stop. Many residents suffer from chronic insomnia in the summer. They find it difficult to sleep, disconnect, and slow down, as their brains remain active when they should be shutting down. Some cover their windows with blackout curtains, cardboard, or even aluminum foil. Others take melatonin supplements. Others simply accept that poor sleep is part of the price they have to pay. But in Lofoten, the problem is not just the darkness or the light, but rather the sudden change between the two, as this means that the body never fully stabilizes. And when the body doesn't rest, the mind suffers. Patience wears thin, emotions are crushed or overflow. But as we mentioned at the beginning of this trip, in Lofoten, nature does not like humans, and it doesn't just show this in the way it reveals or hides the sun. Here, the problem begins when you leave home, believing that the landscape is peaceful and reflects the beauty you see. Because on these islands, beauty is deceiving. The sky may be clear, the sea calm, and the wind still. And yet everything can change in a matter of minutes. The weather in Lofoten gives no warning. It leaves no margin for error. You can start the day with sunshine and end up caught in a snowstorm without having made any serious mistake. That's why every year, hikers who did nothing wrong die. Here the weather doesn't behave as we expect. Then there's the wind. Not the annoying wind, but the wind that decides. Gusts capable of closing bridges, stopping ferries, knocking over cars, and leaving villages isolated for hours or days. You don't see it coming, but when it arrives, you can't stop it. When the cold comes into play, things get even more serious. Hypothermia is not a dramatic scene from a movie. It is silent. First, you lose precision, then strength, and then judgment. Your body shuts down before you realize something is wrong. In Lofoten, on certain winter days, temperatures can drop well below -20 degrees Celsius. These figures may not seem extreme, but here the wind and humidity change everything. The wind chill can plummet to levels where the human body cannot withstand the elements. In some exposed areas, without shelter and with strong winds, your skin begins to freeze in a matter of minutes. Breathing hurts. The air burns inside. And staying still for too long can be enough for your body to start failing. And when you combine the cold, the wind, and other forces of nature, one of the realities most feared by the inhabitants of Lofoten is born: avalanches. From the outside, it's hard to believe, because many of the most beautiful villages on these islands are literally wedged between the sea and almost vertical mountains. It seems like a natural refuge. It seems protected, but it is not. Villages such as Hamnøy, famous for its red houses suspended over the water, and for being one of the most photographed images in Norway, live under walls of snow and rock that do not always remain still. There have been many occasions in Lofoten when houses have been buried, roads wiped out, and villages evacuated in a matter of minutes. Not in remote, uninhabited areas, but in places where thousands of tourists take photos today. The disturbing thing is that many of these avalanches do not occur on stormy days. They occur afterwards, when everything seems calm, when the sky clears and the postcard is perfect again. That's when the mountain releases what it has been accumulating for some time. We live in an age where everything seems controllable, but here there are forces that cannot be negotiated. The mountain does not understand calendars or plans, and when it decides to move, there is no room for discussion. This reinforces an idea that runs through life on these islands. Not all danger is visible, not all risk makes noise, and not everything that is beautiful is safe. That is why the sea is respected here as if it were a living entity, and why for centuries people have believed in the existence of feared sea monsters. With or without monsters, the fishermen of these islands talk about this sea as if it had a life of its own, because it seems to. There are days when it lets them work, others when it won't even let them go out, and some when people don't come back. That mentality is still alive today. That's why no one here boasts of bravery. They boast of having returned. Added to all this is the isolation. Houses separated by miles, roads empty for weeks, and very few unexpected visitors. In winter, if someone knocks on your door, it's usually because something serious is happening. Silence here is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of distraction. And when there is no distraction, everything weighs more heavily. That's why, in Lofoten, spending time alone is not an aesthetic choice. It's part of everyday life. There are winters when you can go whole days without seeing anyone. That creates a very special relationship with yourself. You get to know yourself better, but you also find yourself harder to bear. Some people say they found clarity here. Others admit that this is where they began to break down inside without really knowing why. Isolation doesn't kill you instantly. It wears you down. And that wear and tear is especially noticeable in something very human: the way you relate to others. This reality is especially noticeable in winter, as Lofoten is a small world. Very small. It has very few inhabitants, repetitive routines, and faces you see over and over again. even more so when the weather is bad and tourists prefer to take shelter in the warmth of their homes. That's why there's no anonymity on these islands. Everyone knows who's who's been with whom, and who left whom. Many of them even know much more than that, since in the harshest months, the most used app is not a map or any social network. It's Tinder. Not as a game, but as a tool for social survival. It is said that in winter, Tinder on many of the Lofoten Islands is a closed circle, as you always find the same 10, 12, or 15 people. Your ex, your ex's ex, the girl from the bakery, the fisherman. Stories that intersect again and again. It's not romanticism, but a lack of options, and that creates a forced intimacy. You don't just know each other by sight. You know each other too well. The surprising thing is that when summer arrives, everything changes. Suddenly the islands fill up, thousands of tourists eager to discover one of the most beautiful and magical places on Earth arrive on these islands. New faces, new perspectives, new possibilities. That's when this same closed, extreme, and wild place becomes a kind of human showcase. With this human showcase in mind, things happen in Lofoten that surprise both tourists and locals alike, including real cases of tourists camping or taking photos in cemeteries. Not out of direct provocation, but out of ignorance, to seek shelter from the wind, to take a quiet photo, or in some cases to save money and make their vacation cheaper. For many of these visitors, flirting is also part of the experience, meeting a man or woman from the north with defined bodies, light eyes, blonde hair, wrapped in that Viking imagery that is so magnetic from the outside. What is scarce in winter becomes excessive in summer, although for many in Lofoten it is their best escape valve. Not everyone comes just for a photo. Some come looking for an intense experience, even if it is brief. Now, even knowing that living here puts your life and mental health at risk, could you live here for a winter to meet a Viking man or woman? Yes or no? It will be great to hear from you. While all this is happening, while relationships come and go, there is another constant but necessary reality for survival that sustains everything. In Lofoten, there is a smell that permeates everything during certain months of the year. It's not salt, it's not the sea, it's fish drying in the open air. Thousands of cod heads hang from wooden structures swaying in the wind. It is a mythical image of the place, but also one of the main sources of wealth in the region for centuries. Because here, cod is work, and the main economy. During the peak season, there are people who earn more money in just a few months, cutting fish in the open air, than many managers or executives earn in a whole year in comfortable jobs far from here. And that creates a brutal contradiction. Because while some tourists pay exorbitant prices to sleep in old fishermen's huts converted into luxury accommodations, a few meters away there are people working endless hours in the cold, damp, and constant smell. The money comes in, but it is not always distributed equally. There are well-kept houses, expensive cars, and thriving businesses. And at the same time, there are temporary workers living in cramped conditions, invisible to anyone who only looks at the landscape. Seen from the outside, it looks like wealth. But would you trade your comfort for a few months living here? Lofoten is rich, but here, wealth has a strong smell, stains your hands and sticks to your clothes. And yet that money does not solve everything. It does not buy mental stability. It does not fix loneliness, nor does it fill villages that empty out in winter. That is why when you combine isolation, lack of options, and such a hard life, solutions begin to appear that are uncomfortable from the outside. Solutions that have to do with love, necessity, and the fear of being alone. In many areas of Lofoten, especially in the smaller and more remote villages, the imbalance between men and women is evident. For decades, many young women have left for the south of the country in search of education, work, and a less isolated life. The men, on the other hand, have stayed behind. Fishermen, sea workers, people accustomed to resilience, stable lives, high seasonal incomes, and a chronic loneliness that is not visible in the photos. That void cannot be filled with money or scenery alone. And that is where something begins that is rarely discussed openly in Norway. It is increasingly common to see marriages between local men and foreign women, especially from Thailand, the Philippines, and other Southeast Asian countries. This is not an exception. In some villages, it is part of the human landscape. From the outside, people talk about a bride market. From the inside, the word most often repeated is opportunity. The ancient Vikings had a term for this type of decision forced by life. Skuldval. Choosing not because you want to, but because not doing so comes at an even higher price. For many men in Lofoten, this is the only realistic way to build a family without leaving their homeland. For many foreign women, it is a way out of lives without a future, without stability, or without options. But it's not all cold calculation. Many of these women arrive knowing exactly what they are getting into. They know that the winter is long, that the climate is extreme, that the isolation is real, and yet they accept it, because the beauty of Lofoten is also blinding. Fjords that seem unreal, mountains that plunge steeply into the sea, waterfalls that cascade from hundreds of meters high, and villages suspended between water and snow. Places that, seen from the outside, seem magical. For many of them, this landscape is not just a pretty backdrop, but rather a break with their past, a feeling of starting from scratch in a place that seems clean, pure, almost mythical. Many arrive enamored with the idea of Lofoten before understanding its reality, and when the postcard fades, the cold, the silence, and the emotional and economic dependence appear. Many relationships work, built on respect and time, but others become invisible cages where getting out is not as easy as getting in. Because here there is no social network, apart from Tinder. There is no family nearby. There is no community of their own. And the language, climate, and culture don't help either. That's why, in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, real love stories are born, and others of shared loneliness. Stories like the one you are discovering now, which you will not find anywhere else. So if you are not yet subscribed to Uncensored World, do so now. It is the only way to make sure you don't miss out on these uncomfortable, human, and real journeys we take every week. At this point, you are probably interested in knowing if it is possible to travel to this paradise, and when and how to do so to enjoy it to the fullest. With that in mind, we've researched how to get to Lofoten, what you need to enter, and what you should keep in mind before coming. Getting to these islands isn't complicated, but it's not straightforward either. From Europe, the usual route is to fly first to Oslo, and then continue north, usually to Bodø or Tromsø. From both points, you can take a regional flight, a ferry, or even combine car and boat to reach the archipelago. From America, the route is similar. International flight to Oslo and then domestic connection. It is not a stopover destination. If you come here, it is because you have chosen to. As for visas, if you have a passport from the European Union or most countries in America, you do not need a visa for short stays. The best time to visit Lofoten depends on what you are looking for. If you want green landscapes, long days, and activity, summer between June and August is ideal, but it is also the busiest time of year. If you are looking for auroras, fewer people, and a more raw experience, winter offers a much more authentic side, although it is harsher and more limited. Between these two extremes, spring and fall are often overlooked, and often the best option. Fewer tourists, slightly lower prices, and an interesting balance between light and silence. As for which areas to visit, towns such as Hamnøy, Rein, Sakrisøy, and Unstad are home to some of the most stunning landscapes. Each has its own character, but they all share that feeling of being on the edge of something. However, it must be said, Lofoten is not cheap. Eating out at a simple restaurant for two can easily cost around $60 to $80. A night in a hotel or mid-range accommodation usually costs between $150 and $300, depending on the season. And prices rise quickly in summer. Traveling more economically is possible, but it requires planning. Shopping at supermarkets, renting shared accommodation, or getting around by car instead of organized tours can make a difference. Here, money is not spent without thinking. And an important fact, nature is free, but it is not a theme park. Camping, getting around, and taking pictures have rules, even if they are not always signposted. And that brings us to something we must not forget. As you can see, Lofoten is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. But it is not an easy, comfortable, or forgiving place. It is a place that requires you to be in good shape to endure it. And if this has surprised you, don't leave. The story that follows on the screen right now is even more raw, and it's happening much closer than you think.